we are being invited and called to remember who we are, to remember that we have been innately given these incredible, beautiful blessings from divine, that we are divine within us, that we have direct access to this beautiful magic within us. Now I have been privileged and honored to be able to guide other people to find their truth, to understand that they have these incredible innate gifts, that they don't need to hide them away anymore, that they can come to the surface. In fact, we're being called to bring them to the surface now.
Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Yeah. Hello, you beautiful souls. Welcome to the Praise the Sun podcast, where I'm honored to have on my guest, Rose Hope. Rose, how are you?
Hello, how are you? I'm doing great over here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, it is a Monday. It's a nice early Monday. Well, not too early over here, but I've been up for a while. But yeah, it's a Monday. How's your Monday going so far?
You know, I've learned to love Mondays. Mondays used to not be such a glorious day.
Yeah.
I would like, when you taint Sunday by thinking about Monday, that was me. Whereas like Sunday would be ruined because I'd be already thinking about getting into my work week with the Monday. And I thought, this is not a very good way to be thinking about this, is it?
Yeah.
So I have reframed my perception, and I really look forward to Mondays because it gives me this opportunity for a little bit more structure. It allows me to feel like I'm moving the dial forward. So I've actually really learned to love Mondays now.
Beautiful. I am definitely slowly shifting into that as well. I used to, back when I worked a really long hours job, I would try to stay up late so I could postpone me falling asleep because once I wake up, I have to go to work.
Ah, see, I can so relate to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yes.
Exactly.
So funny.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk more about you and your life and where you are now. For our audience who's not familiar with you, could you give us a background into who you are and where you are now?
Oh my goodness. I think I want to really dial into my spiritual experience and my journey as I have walked this earth. I had a first near-death experience when I was only 5 years old. So I was eating one of those round, hard jawbreaker candies. I don't know if you remember those round candies, but my dad said, "Go sit down before you choke." And I went to go sit down, and sure enough, I took a breath in and I choked on that candy. So my dad came running around, wrapped his arms around me, started doing the Heimlich maneuver, and that candy would not come out. And so I ended up going limp in my dad's arms. And in that moment, I had something really profound happen to me. I had an out of body experience. I vividly remember floating above my body, watching my dad panic below, watching my mom run to go get the phone, watching my big sister peeking around the corner to see what was happening. And I felt none of that chaos below me. I felt like I was held in the arms of God, and peace. That is the biggest thing I remember, is witnessing this chaos, but not feeling any of it, and just feeling this sense of peace and love. And so my dad, of course, saved my life that day. Otherwise, I would not be here. And he actually used his thumb, which, by the way, you're not supposed to do, but he used his thumb. He wedged it in there, and he was able to pry that candy out and get me breathing again. So that was my first experience, where something profound happened, but I was only 5. I didn't really know, how to digest that or how to speak about it. And so after that, what my mom noticed happening, is my dreams started to become really lucid. So I would be awake when I would be having these dreams, and some of them were not nice dreams. They were horrible dreams, some of them. And so my mom would often find me on her bedroom floor beside my parents' bed in the mornings, because they were so terrifying for me. And I started to sense energy differently. I was very perceptive. I could pick up on things. I became quite overwhelmed by energy. And because I was raised in a Catholic home, and even though it was so loving and wonderful, um, you know, it was like when I would share these things, it was almost like my mom didn't really know how to manage it or what to say about it. So she would oftentimes just tell me to pray, and I would go into prayer and, do the things that I knew to do from what I was taught. But I shoved a lot of these intuitive gifts, these intuitives, these deeper knowings that I had. I was also precognitive, so I could see sometimes the future before it happened. And so if you can imagine being a child, and I'm sure some of the listeners out there can relate to some of this too, where they have this intuition, and for whatever reason, they hide it away or they put it away because they feel like they're different, or they feel like, that's weird or whatever it is. And so that was my story growing up. I felt different. I saw the world through a different lens, and of course, catalyzed by that near death experience, but not really understanding it. So, fast forward into my career, I wanted to save lives like my dad had saved mine. And so I became an EMT and firefighter. And so I worked on the ambulance for quite a number of years. And what started to happen to me, actually, this is really fascinating to me because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I would oftentimes have to be around deceased bodies. It's part of that job where, sometimes we would get there too late, or sometimes we would even be there when people transitioned. And so I started to sense energies coming home with me. I started to feel their spirit or their essence. And at the time, I just thought I was losing my mind. I had this science background. And so this was just all hokey, weird stuff. So these energies, these spirits would be joining me, and I would have, shower after shower thinking I could, get rid of this. And I just didn't understand it. So I didn't stay in that profession because I just thought I'm losing my I'm losing my marbles here, and I need to kind of switch paths. So I ended up staying in the healthcare industry, but I ended up teaching. So I taught in health sciences throughout my 20s, and I loved teaching. But I was still on this deeper discovery because I was this overachiever people pleaser. I thought, God or creator, whatever you call that source energy, had given me a second chance at life. And I needed to prove that that was the right choice, that I was worthy of a second chance. And so became very addicted to this people pleasing, overachieving, always, always going, always going. I remember my mom asking me in my 20s, she said, why do you have to do everything? Like, why do you have to do all of these different things? And I think part of that stemmed from that near death experience of feeling like, it could be taken at any time. But not only that, I got to get as much in as I can because, I was given this second chance. And so that became a bit unhealthy for me. And so I was blessed with yet another near death experience. And so the second near death, it wasn't anything overly traumatic. I was actually recovering at home from a reconstructive surgery on my left knee. I had an old skiing injury. Here I am, 26 years old. I'm at home recovering, and I am hobbling on crutches from the kitchen to the bed I'd made in the living room. And my brother-in-law was with me at the time, helping to, tend to me as the surgery was quite invasive. And something happened. We figure maybe a response to the medication or something, but I went completely unresponsive. So I blacked out. My brother-in-law thankfully caught me when I went unresponsive. And in that experience, it was very different from the first. Now I'm an adult and I've been through some life, and I am now transported into what I can only describe as heaven. I'm brought to this beautiful, magical space where I'm literally floating in time and space. I can feel the sense of unconditional love, unlike I had ever felt it before, even from when I was 5. I feel so euphoric. I feel so incredibly amazing. And these beautiful orbs of light start to surround me. And I'm talking colors of the most incredible vibrancy, colors I've never seen and witnessed here in this world. And they are surrounding me. And I can again feel this unconditional love just radiating from these beautiful energies of light. And I know that they're angels. I have this knowing inside of me. Oh, this is how angels present themselves. And the orbs of light, it's like they have these extra orbs around them, which I would understand to be wings, how we depict them. But they were energies of light. And I just felt so good. And I remember thinking, I'm staying here, to which they heard. And so they communicated in this frequency type of way. And I heard very clearly back in my mind, no, sorry, you're not staying here. You have work to do. And so this was such a real and tangible experience for me. I really didn't want to come back. but I did. And I awoke to my brother-in-law staring at me wide-eyed, looking at me. And I didn't know how to express what had just happened to me. My first thought is like, okay, I'm really losing my mind. Again, remembering I come from a very science background, very logical thinking. I'd shoved away all that intuition a long time ago. And so I'm scared to say anything. And so I'm processing. And in the days to follow this experience, I just know that I need to speak this truth. I need to share this with somebody. So a girlfriend comes over. I'm still recovering at home. She comes for a visit, and I'm telling her about the angels because I have to get it out. Like, I cannot keep this inside of me. It was too beautiful, too miraculous, too euphoric to hold back. And so I'm explaining this angelic experience that I had. And my brother-in-law, who was living with me at the time, who was the one that caught me when I went into that experience, he came running into the kitchen. He slammed his hand on the counter and he said, I knew it. I felt the angels too. So he also had experienced as a bystander something really profound and powerful. And he validated that experience for me. So for him, when I went unresponsive, he couldn't find my pulse. He didn't think I was breathing. He went to go call 911. And he said he felt energies. Like, that's all he could describe it as. Like, he felt these energies that were so beautiful and pure. And he heard them say, she's going to be okay. Just wait. And so he came and crouched beside me and he just waited for a moment. And before he knew it, I was waking up with a smile on my face. So that was his experience. And so it was this incredible moment of God, of divine, just saying, hey, you're not losing it. Someone else experienced it too. This is valid. And you need to share this with the world. And so that really was the beginning for me of starting to put some things to paper to share the story. And a lot of people will say, okay, you had these 2 near-death experiences. Surely now you had this awakening and you're figuring life out. But it wasn't so fast. So after that experience, and this happens with a lot of near-death survivors, is we kind of crave to go back to that heavenly space. And I wanted that heavenly space again. I was hungry for it. I was thirsty for it. I started seeking in everything outside of myself for this heaven. I thought, okay, I'll be happy when, or I'll feel this heavenly feeling once I have my children, once I, have success with my business, once I do all of these things, then I'll have that. So I played that I'll be happy when game. Have you ever played the I'll be happy when game, anyone? It's a losing game because happiness is not found outside of yourself. And so for 5 years after that second near death, I was fumbling, and I was fumbling hard because I wanted to taste that again, and I couldn't find it. So I was seeking in everything outside of myself, trying to find this experience or this euphoria or this taste of heaven again. And it was eluding me. And in fact, the harder I tried, the deeper I sunk into this despair and depression, thinking it's not possible. I need to go back to that place. And believe it or not, I got to a point, my son was about 6 months old. I was in severe postpartum. I didn't know I was in such deep postpartum, but I was severely depressed and I was in so much emotional pain. And I just wanted to go to heaven. I just wanted to leave because I felt that me being here was not going to serve anybody if I was that miserable and that low of a space. And so I was contemplating my death and how I was going to do that. And so in this deep state of despair, thankfully, growing up Catholic, my mom had taught me to pray. And so prayer was a go-to for me. And so that's what I did that day. I prayed and I said, okay, I can't see another path. The only path that I can see is the one in which I'm not here in this physical plane anymore. It's too much for me. I don't belong here. I just don't belong here is what the belief was that I had. And so in that moment, it was a plea. It was a plea for mercy. It was a plea for me to just surrender to what was. It was a demand that I was shown another path. And let me tell you, I was shown another path. And so in that prayer, I was visited by what I can only call an angel as well. And I had this angel come to me, and this angel showed me this vision, this incredible vision of what I was to do. And it was to create a holistic healthcare system. And, I had spent my life in healthcare. I had a degree in health management and administration. So I understood healthcare, and I had been on my own health journey. Oftentimes our experiences in life are the directional signposts for us to say, hey, this is what you're supposed to do in life, and this is part of your purpose here. And so that was like a great epiphany for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this experience of me struggling with my physical wellness as well as my mental wellness as I move through life. This is it. This is what I'm supposed to help other people with. And so it was this beautiful epiphany. And I literally got up the next morning. That idea of me leaving this earth was now completely vanished, and I had a mission. And so I created this holistic healthcare company. And as I was creating it, I did not have a clue what I was going to uncover. Because as I was creating it, I was meeting these beautiful spiritual teachers and these people who understood life in a way that had eluded my whole life. And so I was finding the answers to some of my deepest questions now. And I was being shown that the only path really truly was inside of myself, that the path to my soul was the answer. And so I started to discover that, and I started to lean in, and I started to take courses out of skepticism. Again, my science mind, my logical mind, played a role there. But people were like, oh, I can read energy, and I can heal this, and I can do this. And I was like, come on, I don't know about this stuff. And so I went in as a skeptic to take these classes. And boy, was I blown away. I was blown away at what was possible. I was blown away at my own gifts and abilities. It was like all of the things that I had stuffed away had now come to the surface for me. And it was like this incredible recognition of the miracle that I am, and the love that I possess within my heart, and the incredible gifts that have been innately given to me. And so that really was the big turning point for me. And so I really didn't hit that until I was in my early 30s, where I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get it. Now I can actually see that we are being invited and called to remember who we are, to remember that we have been innately given these incredible, beautiful blessings from divine, that we are divine within us, that we have direct access to this beautiful magic within us. And so that ultimately led me to where I am today, which now I have been privileged and honored to be able to guide other people to find their truth, to understand that they have these incredible innate gifts, that they don't need to hide them away anymore, that they can come to the surface. In fact, we're being called to bring them to the surface now. And so this is the beautiful work of what we call the Akashic records, your soul's library. And so this is a space of consciousness that I bring people into, and I teach them how to use it for themselves so that they can continue this beautiful, beautiful journey. And so that really brings us to now, and this incredible place that I have the privilege of being in.
Wow, thank you so much for that very detailed and intimate story of your life. That I don't even know where to begin. So many questions, and yeah, wow. Since so the Akashic is the last thing you said, and that's something that I've been thinking about lately. So let's explore that some more. For the
Yes.
people who've never even heard of that, could you explain what that is?
Yes, I would love to. So the word Akash is Sanskrit for primordial substance or beginning of time. And so the idea is that we can access this space of consciousness in which we can receive information direct from the ether, from source, from divine, from God, again, whatever your belief system might be. And so we can access this beautiful stream of energy in which the ego is not getting in the way, the biases are not getting in the way. So it's a very pure space that we get to go into, a sacred space, if you will. And so I like to call it the soul's library or God's library. That seems to be really helpful for me in wrapping my head around this kind of multidimensional world. And so we can enter into this space through meditation, through breath work, through prayer. Many people are doing it already and don't even know it. It really is a space of consciousness. Now, there are people that say it exists in this dimension of consciousness, in this dimension of consciousness, but really the Akash much like God or source energy, in which it is in every dimension of existence. But we simply are tuning into a higher dimension frequency in which we are going into the sacred container, if you can imagine. So if I were to read your records, I would bring you into the sacred container with me. And then from there, I would share information and we can ask questions and have dialogue with divine, with our spirit team. Again, whatever your belief system and serves you most is. So this for me was so interesting because I was being told about this idea of the Akashic records, and in my mind I just saw like medical files in a filing cabinet. I was like, what are these Akashic records? It didn't make sense to me. And so that's actually why I went and took the course, because I was like, okay, this is just kind of weird. It's not really making sense to me. But in that process, what was so profound and so beautiful is I recognized that I had been hiding away all of these intuitive gifts. So we have these intuitive gifts of like clairvoyancy, clear seeing, clairaudience, clear hearing, clairsentience, clear feeling, claircognizance, clear knowing. And there's a few others, but those are the main ones. And so some of us are having deja vu and we're having dreams. Some of us are hearing things inside of our mind and not understanding what that's all about. Some of us are feeling things, the gut feeling. Some of us are just having knowings like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done that, So we all have this intuition within us. And, we have this beautiful blessing now of uncovering, how spirit connects with us, how spirit communicates with us, primarily. For me, I get visuals, so I'm very clairvoyant. But I also have the other clairs as well that come to the surface too. I'm a channeler as well, so I hear auditorily as well. And so we all have this. The question is whether or not we feel like leaning into that. Not all of us are meant to do this work as a profession. Some of us are meant to just utilize our intuition for our own internal compass and our own guidance in life. But what I do know for sure is that the Akashic Records brings you into deeper relationship with who you are. And the gift in that is building and forging this nourishing relationship with the God aspect of myself, my divine self, my higher self. We can reference it as the universal mind, the God mind. Again, lots of different names to call that. But the point being is that we're being invited to build a relationship with this aspect of our beingness. And we are multidimensional beings, and we forget that. And so we get kind of caught up in the hustle and bustle and the conditioning and this is what life is supposed to look like here as a human being. And, there's this invitation for us to expand that understanding, for us to recognize that there's so much more to us than meets the eye, and for us to really take our power back. There's this big call right now in the world, and maybe you've been feeling this too, where we're being invited to take our power back. And what I mean by this is that, for thousands of years, we have been conditioned to let the logical or the ego aspect of our mind take over. And I'm not saying the ego aspect of our mind is bad. However, over many years, that ego mind now takes over. You think about your biggest dream that you have, and the ego comes in and it says, you don't know what you're talking about. Who are you to go on someone's podcast and talk about this or whatever? Like it's going to come in and it's going to give you this this negative spin, because it's really trying to protect you. It's not trying to hold you back. It's trying to protect you, but it doesn't know its boundaries. Because again, for so many years, we haven't been putting that ego aspect into check, right? We haven't been setting boundaries with it. In metaphysics, we call it the false self, and the true self being the God self. And so we've gotten kind of lost inside of ourselves, and we're all kind of mumbled, and we can't discern like, okay, is this for my highest good, or is this coming from ego, or like, oh, and we get really confused and we get lost in there. And then we keep making these, choices by default and out of, this need for protection. The ego thousands and thousands of years ago, it was like, hey, run from the predator. Like that's bad, run from it. But now it's just coming in and it's making up all these incredible stories. And most of the time we're buying into those stories. And so we're actually losing some of the truth of who we are because we're getting caught in those stories. And so a lot of people will say, well, like, how do I even start by, like, starting to get that ego self to kind of step aside? And, I love to just remind people that, you're multidimensional. You have this opportunity to be the witness, to be your own witness, to be your own bystander in a way, and witness yourself going through these experiences and going through these emotions. And then from that place, then we can start to create a bit more discernment. Then we can start to create some of the boundaries within ourselves. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to say, hey, thanks, ego, but I've got this. And if you want to take it a step further, you give that ego mind a name and you get that ego to step aside, because the ego is what stops us from doing most of the magic here. And it for sure played a really big role. Even as a skeptic, when I took the Akashic records, that ego was coming in. And it's like, you're just making stuff up. You don't know what you're doing, and I've learned to build a healthy relationship with that part of myself. And so, it becomes this very loving exchange versus like, oh my gosh, I can't do that, the imposter syndrome, or like whatever it is that's coming in that's holding you back from living the life that you really desire to live. So I know I went on a tangent there, didn't I, about the Akashic records, but I was so divinely guided to share this aspect of our ego self, because I think it's what really gets in the way. And so if you're listening to this and the ego's coming in and it's saying, oh, this is a little bit weird, I just really invite you to invoke that sense of awe and wonder, because that awe and wonder is such a tool for us to really lean in and to keep exploring, because we just don't know what we don't know, right?
We don't know what we don't know. And a lot of people have that curiosity inside of them, but they have reluctance because of social conditioning and their, experiences growing up with
Yeah,
whatever environment that they've grown up in. So I get that.
me
It
too.
honestly, it takes a brave soul to want to stand out and be different because, I guess if you think of it from, at least from what I've read and heard from a genetically perspective, you needed to be conforming towards whatever the predominant idea was and throughout history because you had a greater chance of surviving if you stuck with the pack.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
I mean, like, yeah, it goes back to the survival mechanism, right? Like, how brilliant is that part of our mind, though?
yeah,
Right? Like, we got to give it some props, because everyone always kind of like puts the ego in the corner, poor ego,
right.
but at the same time, it's like, okay, at what point, where's the line? Like, where's the line? Can I tell you another little side story about the
Of
ego? Because
course.
I just want to like really bring out how powerful this ego mind is in us. I was on the final exam of my final class of a degree, and this was my health management degree in my 20s. And I had like been raising a family, working, another job and finishing this degree. So it was like a big deal for me to be at the finish line, right? So here I am going in to write this final exam. And I, for the first time in the previous class, had failed an exam. And I had never failed before, but I failed an exam and I had to do a rewrite. Thankfully, the rewrite was successful. But now here I am writing this exam. And guess what? My ego is coming in the whole test. And it's like, you don't know the answers. You're failing. Like, this is going really, really bad. You're never going to finish this degree. Like, it was like in my head so big and so loud. And so I finished that exam and I knew I had failed. I knew that I had just botched this exam. So much so, I get to my car and I'm bawling my eyes out because I just want to be done this exam. And I decide when I get home, I'm going to email my professor. So I get home, I email my professor. And I'm like, okay, I know that I failed this exam. Can you just tell me what I need to work on, what I need to like fix for the rewrite? Because I'd like to start studying now, because I'm really ready to get this done. And I'm trying to be proactive, right? And so my professor emails me back and it says, I don't know whose test you think you wrote, but you got 87%. Okay, come on. This is how incredible the ego is. It can make up a whole story for you and convince you that the reality is totally different than what the actual reality is. And I suppose I want to share this story to just invite you to recognize how profound that ego can be. and invite you to maybe do a check-in and see, are there any stories that I'm telling myself right now that are totally untrue? What am I telling myself that actually maybe isn't true? And to really question yourself. And that story stands out so profoundly for me because it was like this big light bulb of like, holy smokes, I made up this entire story that I failed an exam when I actually like aced the exam, right? So, there's a lesson in that. There's learning in that. And so, again, being able to put that ego aside and say, wait a second, I don't know if the story you're telling me is accurate. It might have been accurate last time, but who's to say that it's accurate this time? Because that's what the ego does, right? It pulls up from the subconscious that experience that happened before. So and so said this before, or you had this happen before. And so it like imprints this storyline. And then as soon as we're hooked into the story, well, now we're like on the hamster wheel, right? Isn't that amazing?
I can certainly attest to the ego creating stories and you certainly just full wholeheartedly believing them and then later finding out that it's just complete rubbish. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and not to say that the ego's always full of it,
Right.
because there are times where the ego is, it really brings in this kind of logical aspect as well. But it's an
Hmm.
invitation to, again, build the relationship with that. So, like, I talk to my ego all the time. And, my clients give their ego's name. Recently, and I just love this one so much, I have to share it. My client named hers Ivana Gripe a Lot. Isn't that hilarious? Ivana Gripe a Lot. You get it, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's fun. It's fun to build these relationships within ourselves because then we can catch ourselves more often and we can say, hey, wait a second, wait a second. Is that really true? Or am I just making the story up? Right. And is that story serving me? A lot of times the story is causing us suffering. This is a big reason why we suffer so much in this world. And I honestly think that we can suffer so, so much less if we can allow ourselves to not get caught up in the ego story. I've created a whole bunch of suffering in my life because of the stories that I've made up, you know? And so, yeah, it's sad in a way that we create this pain within ourselves. But it is wonderful when we can recognize, like, hey, wait a second, I don't need to stay in that space. I don't need to buy into that story. And then look at it from, okay, what story do I want to lean into? What story is filling me up right now instead of draining me? What story is allowing me to step into my divinity instead of draining me? What's that story? So there's a very big difference, right, between the ego mind and between the higher mind, right, in terms of our imagination. I often teach my students that imagination is one of the portals to our intuition. Because a lot of times they say, well, aren't I just making stuff up? I'm like, where did it come from in the first place? Like, where aren't we all just making this up as we go in a way? Right. And so it's this opportunity to look at these different aspects. You've got that ego mind that has an imagination too and hooks into story, but then you've got your divine imagination, and it's the divine imagination that we want to invoke. It's the divine imagination of like what is possible. Like, can we create heaven on earth? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Leaning into those vibrational frequencies that really allow us to come to this deeper understanding of the divine within ourselves and how we can start to create this reflection in this world. And that reminds me of like this idea of accessing heaven. A lot of people say, like, you went to heaven, so like, what's the secret? Like, how do we do this? How do we create heaven on earth? Well, first of all, heaven on earth looks different to everybody, and some people might not even believe in the heaven or hell. But what I'm expressing is like, what's that place of joy and peace and love, unconditional love, harmony? What is that space? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? Really leaning into that. But in order for us to create it out here, we have to create it in here first. We cannot create it outside of ourselves. That was the biggest lesson for me as I tried to like claw my way through my 20s and early 30s and like playing that I'll be happy when game and losing, like I was looking for heaven everywhere out here, but it can't be found out there until it's found in here. And once we can really tune into that frequency inside of ourselves, it's like, all of a sudden, it's like the outer world begins to reflect that. It really does. And I'm not saying that my world is always heavenly. Okay, I got 2 children, I got a busy life. There's still stuff that goes on that reminds me that, to stay humble, and reminds me that there are still going to be challenges and things that I have to learn and to grow through. However, as a result of witnessing heaven inside of myself now, I, those difficult situations become okay. Those mediocre situations become even better. Those great situations become grand, because now I'm at this place where I can see and witness the goodness and the glory and the peace and the joy and all the things that I desire inside of myself. And then they just naturally show up outside of me. So it's one of those pieces to manifestation I don't think a lot of people talk about. And I think it's an important one.
Definitely. Definitely. There's a lot there that I wanted to extrapolate on, but I actually wanted to say something before I forgot. This is related to the Akasha. I had an experience, is it November? I think it was like towards the end of October when I was working with my mentor and we were doing some psychic training. And I haven't done, I have had experiences with channeling and mediumship and stuff like that, but I've never actually done a reading for people or read people like that
Mm.
before. And we just had a fun experiment where he gave me 4 pictures and I was supposed to give the story of that person. We only got to run out of time, but in short, the first person, everything I said was 100% accurate.
Wow.
And I was wondering, when the information comes to me, I was just doing automatic writing. So I just focused on the picture and I was just doing automatic writing, and visual imagery and stuff came to me and I just wrote it down. But from I guess it could be different things to different people, but from your perspective, is that reading the Akasha?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, because a lot of people are like, am I in? Am I not in? Like, what does that look like? So, you do have to be somewhat intentional if you're going into the Akasha. There is like a structure to it, and there's certain intentions that we set. So even if you're going in with breath work, you're still setting an intention that you're going in for the highest good of all, that you are only allowing beings of light that are serving your highest good to come in. So there's certain frameworks, if you will, that are encouraged when it comes to the Akash. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you do an experience like that, that you're not quite tuned in. However, there is a little bit of a difference. And I'll explain it to you from the standpoint of intuition. So you were using your intuition, your gifts of probably your telepathic abilities, your gifts of your clairsentience and feeling into that, your clairvoyancy. So you were accessing your intuition, no doubt, in that experience. The difference when you're tuning into the Akash is that you are oftentimes in a more altered state of consciousness, or a deeper level of consciousness, again, with intention. And the idea is that I can use my intuition and I can tell you things right now and I can get downloads and exchange information. Fantastic. That's great. However, when we actually create that intention of going into the Akash, then what happens is it's almost like this sacred structure. So now we come into a higher vibrational frequency. And not only that, but now everything is amplified. So I might get some intuitive insight. So let's just say you saw that picture and you felt the story and you articulated the story and it was like bang on. Now, if we were to go inside of the records and you were going to do the same thing, what you might find is that even for that other person, they might also feel something on the other side. What you might also notice is that you get deeper answers, or even deeper information, or even deeper questions that are asked that provoke deeper information. So it's almost like now we're just going in and we're peeling back even more layers in the space. We're amplifying whatever healing can be done about whatever is expressed through that space. So that would be the difference. You're still using your intuition and your gifts in this phase. It's just now we've got this amplification kind of experience, and we can actually go farther and deeper faster through that experience. So I can't tell you whether you were in or whether you were out. I can tell you, however, that there is a difference. There's a depth that comes when we are intending and consciously aware that we are moving ourselves into the space of the Akash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And it reminds me of a book that I have that I bought many years ago when I had first found out about the Akashic, and it had a prayer or invocation or something like that
Mm.
for opening and being uh, just just to open it. It was a certain step and process in order to open the Akasha. I forgot the full name. It was a book with a blue background. I think the person who created it was Native American or something of that nature, but I'm not quite sure. But that was a long time ago. But yeah, that was a great explanation. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome. I just love it because, again, it creates almost like this beautiful sacred structure for us to do this work in,
Right.
So then that way we're not like leaking energy and we're not getting kind of distorted energy. It's like we've got this really sacred container. And so that's why I mean, I love I'm so biased, I will admit it, but I love the Akash because you can do every type of healing modality from the space of the Akash. So again, it can amplify and really help us in this beautiful journey.
What, if you can, what is the steps process to make that sacred structure? Because I understand what you're saying there. Because a lot of times, if you're just kind of going at it from, I guess, an intuitive perspective, you do still have the background of the ego, which can alter information, distort the signal, and yeah, just in general, just mess up what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a few components. So first of all, there are some standard prayers out there. Linda Howe also has the Center for Akashic Studies, and she's one of the more profound, prolific authors and teachers of the Akashic records that some people might know about. And so she has quite a detailed prayer. However,
One second.
yes,
Are you talking about Linda Moulton Howe?
I'm talking about this Linda Howe. I don't know if you know this Linda Howe, but
Okay, cool.
HOWE. Yeah.
That's so crazy. That same name. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
There's a researcher named Linda Moulton Howe. She's pretty big. But
Oh,
she's a UFO researcher. So
oh,
I was like,
interesting.
that same Linda?
That
Yeah.
would have been a really interesting kind of
Yeah.
connection there. Okay, well,
Sorry for deserving. Yeah.
there.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's how I learned. But they have guided me ever since that like we can create our own prayer. So some people feel really resonant with that prayer. Sometimes people will do like a meditative experience where them as well as the recipient, if they're going into someone's records, they'll go through this meditation, but with that they will set intention. So there's several components that are really important if you're setting intention or doing some sort of prayer. I like to direct my attention to God or source energy. In fact, why don't I just open? Why don't I just open your records today, Sage? Are you cool with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go. Okay, so most people call you Sage, but I appreciate having your birth name as well. So I'm just going to say the prayer, and then
Okay.
I'll break it down for everybody, and then we'll see if any other insight comes in for you. Sound good? All
Let's
right.
do it.
So your job is to open your heart to receiving. And here we go. I'm going to dive in. So this is how I say it. God, divine light, and source energy. Thank you for allowing us to experience your pure love through the Akash. May all be blessed through the divine of the Akash for the highest good. And may divine beings of light help us to receive what is required for our most divine path and to support the divine path of others. Please allow Sage to experience your pure love found here. And just so the audience knows, I then say that again in silence, but now I would use Sage's full legal name here. And then I'm also going to say in my head, not out loud, please allow my ego to serve its highest good. And so I set that intention, and then the records are now open. So I'm now stating that they're open. So if you listen to that prayer, you see, I direct my attention to God or source, whatever that is for me. I go into gratitude first. And this is like a beautiful way to start prayer, right? Is to go into a space of gratitude. So thank you. Thank you for allowing us to receive this beautiful love. Thank you. Really opening us up to the receiving. Then we set an intention that this serves the highest good for myself and for everybody else. So what we're trying to do is collectively increase the vibration of consciousness. We're setting that intention that whatever is being expressed is here for the highest good for all of humanity. And then we also invite any divine light beings, so any spirit guides, any ancestors, any energy that needs to come in to teach us, to show us, to come as a teacher, as a guide for us. We open it for them, but we are specific about saying divine light beings. So these are energies that are coming in with the highest good, the highest intention of love and compassion. So then we're not getting any kind of riffraff, so to speak, in, if you believe in that. And then also for the highest good and the highest good of our divine path. And then we direct our attention to a specific person, place, or thing, and then we're in.
Did anything happen to your mic? It sounds a little bit muffled.
Oh, does it? Oh,
Okay,
interesting.
yeah, I think it just fixed itself.
Did it?
Yeah, it's back. Okay,
Oh, is
sorry.
it back? Okay, I have
Yeah.
not touched a thing.
Okay, that's interesting. Wow.
Okay, so already, like, sometimes we can notice these weird kind of glitches in the matrix, so to speak. So almost as though as I open the records, something shifted energetically, yeah?
Yeah, undeniably. Yeah.
So now I'm just tuned into your records. I could also open the records of a group. So I could also, if people were listening, and by the way, if you are listening to a replay even after and someone opens the records, that person is still going to the records at the time in which you are listening to them. Isn't that interesting? So you
Yeah.
will still get the value and the benefit of that because in the records, there's no space and time, essentially, right? Even though we say, past, present, and future, it's really, there is no space and time. It's everything that is, was, and ever shall be. And that's what's so profound about it, right? So
Right.
again, without going down that rabbit hole, just inviting you to just feel this presence of divine, right? To just tune into divine here. And we're going to stay in the space for the rest of the recording just so that you can feel it. What's beautiful about going into the Akash is like I don't even have to articulate anything to you, Sage, and you're still going to be getting an adjustment. I like to also call them soul massages because your soul's getting massaged right now, whether you know it or not. And some people, when I open the records, are like, "Why do I feel so emotional all of a sudden?" Or "Why do I feel so giddy?" Or "Why do I feel this?" And they can feel a frequency. Um, yeah, and every time you go into the records is different, by the way. So you might go in one time and you might like feel like you can see this big library, and other times you might feel like you're in this naturescape, and other times you might feel like you're just in a void. So every time you go in, it will be different based on whatever it is that you need in that particular moment of time. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah.
My heart's at peace.
It's beautiful. I can feel that. Yeah, I can feel that. It's so interesting. Can I share with you what some of the insights that are coming in?
Yeah.
I know we haven't even asked any questions, but I just feel really compelled to share this with you. Um, First of all, it's beautiful that your mom recognized the ancient wisdom in you because you have been a soul that's been around for many, 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 many years. You have probably sensed that and felt that. The other thing that I want to share with you that's really important is I can see this little boy actually. It's very tribal to me. It's actually bringing me into, I feel like I'm actually being brought into some sort of African tribe. It's not giving me an exact location. This is a previous lifetime of yours, by the way, Sage. And you were the wanderer in that lifetime. So you would always wander outside of the village and go exploring. And I'm seeing this little boy come up in you in this curiosity, in this, like, again, back to that awe and wonder I talked about earlier. And they're saying, keep the awe and wonder, man. Like this little boy is just saying, don't lose that. Like keep that lens in which you're looking at things again for the first time, right? It's like witnessing what you didn't see before, or witnessing what you did see before, but just in a different way, in a different light. And this is one of your greatest gifts as the wise sage you are. So there's some really interesting things that are going to be happening because you're already tuned into your gifts. You're going to become a really great, prolific teacher of your time. And you've already been a teacher in many ways, but I'm telling you that what I'm seeing here is this opportunity for you to continue leaning into this. I see you speaking on more stages and speaking on more platforms. I also see the book. So whether you've started the book or not, there's a book. I think there's several books actually, Sage. So whether or not you've published them or produced them, I'm seeing those books as well. So I want to remind you that any of these future pathways that come up, you've probably seen them already in your mind, but they are pathways of possibility, and it is still a choose your own adventure. And I feel like that's really important for me to share with the audience. If somebody is telling you future things, it's still a choose your own adventure. You have the power of free will. And so don't forget to keep your power intact and not to give it away to any guru or any mentor. That's yours to keep sacred. And I've heard so many stories. I know this is a little offshoot of what I was just talking about, but they're telling me that this is important to share too. There's been so many stories of spiritual guides who are coming in and they're saying, well, if you don't do exactly what I say, you're going to be in trouble. I know a woman who spent tens of thousands of dollars on a psychic, and the psychic was telling the woman if she didn't continue to see her and pay for her services, that the woman would never find the love of her life.
Wow.
And the woman was so desperate, she believed her. And
Wow.
so I feel like this is really important to say right now. And I don't know if it's happened to somebody listening today. Like, first of all, you're not alone. It's okay. But this is a reminder for you to not give your power to anybody. Spiritual teachers are meant to teach you how to harness your own magic and your own skills and send you on your way. They're not there to keep you hostage, just like that ego is not there to keep you hostage. So I just want to remind people of that as I share this, as I share these things with you, Sage, you still have your own inner knowing. You still have your own power of free will to choose whether you want to lean in or not lean in. I don't know anything that you can't access yourself, and the choice is yours. So I just felt like that was important to share that as well. So what's coming up for you about what I just shared, and some of the things that were coming up? Do you want to speak to any of that?
Um, yeah. Um, s- uh, Let me gather these thoughts. I have been doing some writing, and you are not the first person who mentioned a book. Well, someone just straight up told me you should be writing a book. I'm like, okay, okay, but to hear it again, and I've been writing since then, but okay, and the stage thing has, I don't know if I'm like accessing a timeline or something, but there's a reoccurring vision in my mind of me giving some type of speech on stage, and it's always titled Power.
Wow.
It's the same speech every time, and it's me giving a speech, empowering the audience, and remembering and letting them remember that the power is theirs, and it's always theirs, and it's always been
Mm,
theirs.
amen.
So that's, I've
Wow.
never given a speech or anything, but that vision just is a reoccurring like clockwork, and I was just
It's
like,
I
okay,
saw it so clear in my mind, so clear in my mind.
yeah.
So thank you so much for validating and sharing that back. I know I kind of put you on the spot there too, but I just really wanted for the audience to receive that as well. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I'm just so excited when I feel into your records here. Like I feel this like beautiful grounded joy Like we can have both, right? A lot of people think, well, if I'm in this joy excited stage, then I'm not grounded, but you can have both. And I feel this like you have this really special ability to be in joy, but be still anchored in a really healthy way. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts for you is that you have that ability to be in both of those spaces at the same time. And not a lot of people can do that. Oftentimes they get excited and then they kind of like get caught up in that excitement and then they kind of lose their footing, if you will, right?
Hmm.
Or they get caught with the dangling carrot or the like, oh, what do they call it? Like, getting squirreled or whatever, being
Yeah.
the shiny, flashy object syndrome. And
Hmm.
so it's so beautiful to meet another person who's able to just stay really rooted in their divine path, but also feel the joy of that and feel the peace of that and all the goodness that comes from that too. Because I think that for a really long time, at least for me, I thought like for me to achieve my dreams that I would have to work so freaking hard and I would be overwhelmed and I would be like this, the crazy chicken with the head cut off kind of energy. Like I thought that's what I needed to do to produce success. And that was so not what success looked like. Success looks for me like being able to hang out with my kids this afternoon, right? And then maybe
Yeah.
like teach a class later on, like that to me, and like have that balance and that blend where I can like be grounded in nature, but then go and do a podcast and share my message. Like that to me, that flow, that ebb, that harmony, like that's what I've uncovered as success. And I've recognized that I actually don't have to try so hard. Like I was playing, like trying. I'm like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm trying so hard. But I've let go of the try because I've come to understand that it's divine doing the work. And this
Hmm.
is like so hard to wrap your head around. Sounds like you've already got this figured out too, but I'm telling you, once I surrendered and I was like, oh, wait a second, God's doing the work for me. Like, God's guiding me to these beautiful podcasts with these incredible people. God's speaking on behalf of me. I might think I'm the one that's doing the lifting, but it's really not me. And if I can allow God to do that work, I'm like, I don't have a burden. I don't have to try. Like the weight of the world on my shoulders is no longer. And I carried that world for a long time. And now I recognize that I just need to get out of the way and let divine do the work. When I wake up in the morning, I acknowledge that God's getting up with me. I say, good morning, God. I know you're rising with me today. Thank you so much. I know that you're going to do everything I need you to get done today. Thank you. So I already set that ball in motion. I validate that. And so I know that it's going to be God speaking through me as I move through my day, that each experience has been God led. And it takes away so much pressure because holy smokes, do we ever put such incredible pressure on ourselves to show up in a certain way? And I don't know about you, but I don't want to hustle. I don't want to like work from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. I want to have connection. I want to build my relationships. I want to have time for myself, all of the things. I spent a lot of my life sick because I thought that I had to push and push and push and push. But there's a really big difference between being driven and being drawn. And I don't know about you, but I want to be drawn the whole way. I want to be led. I want those spiritual breadcrumbs to show up and I want to follow those spiritual breadcrumbs instead of this like driving, pushing, pushing, pushing. I did enough of that. So this next half of my life, I'm getting drawn instead of driven.
And surrender has been the theme of the year for me, for sure,
Mm,
especially after I read this book,
hmm
Surrender
Brilliant.
Experiment.
Surrender experiment. Yes.
And such a powerful book. And I was just like, that's how I want to live my life. Like, I don't want to fight reality anymore. I just want to surrender to the flow of things, and whatever that looks like, let's do it. Life already has its ups and its downs, so that's a given. But I know if I'm doing my best to surrender, then I'm following the path
Yeah.
of least resistance,
Yes.
and I will naturally go to where I need to be. I mean, me surrendering and following the path of least resistance has led us to this interview. So,
Mm.
it's everything is working like clockwork and divine timing for me, and I'm just doing my best to surrender and doing my best to allow the ego to subside and rest. And once it's at rest, it's also fighting less, and then I can surrender even more.
Yes.
So
Ah,
so yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it is a practice, though. I just want to remind the
absolutely,
audience that it's a
yeah,
practice because there's some days I probably am not surrendering so much as others.
yeah,
Still,
exactly.
it is such a practice. And so we can extend grace to ourselves as we go through that process too. Because when I first started to surrender a bit more, I gotta admit, Sage, like there were some moments where I was like, ugh, like I could feel this angst inside of me of like letting go, right? And coming into acceptance around things that I didn't want to accept, But I'll tell you though, it's been one of the greatest gifts is that art of surrender, right? Of just like, hey, okay, I might not agree with what's going on, but I can accept that that's the way it is. And I can choose to grab and to take more of the value in that experience, right?
Yes,
It's like we
yeah,
have this opportunity, like it's a constant silver platter for us. Our job is to just squeeze the value, right? Even in those experiences that we think are like the worst thing ever, right? We have an opportunity to say, what can I get out of this? Like, how can I win in this? How can I gain something of value out of this? That's our job. It's to say, what's in this for me? And again, to be curious about what that is instead of like fighting and fighting and fighting. It's that fighting energy that's so exhausting and that starts to kind of disintegrate the quality and the value that we could experience.
yes, exactly. I I have a question that I've been asking my guests pretty consistently now, and I like this question because it's everyone has a different perspective, and I just like to see the commonalities or some of the patterns there, I guess. But if you could, do you have a view of the future? Have you seen the future? What does the future look like to you?
Mm, thank you. It's a beautiful question to lean into. Um, you know, uh, Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, says we cannot deal with the future; it has not happened yet. And yet at the same time, everything has happened already. Everything that we desire is already there. The pathways are already there. And now we get to go on this beautiful opportunity of choosing that. So to me, the future is what I want it to be. What do you want your future to be? Rather than letting it be dictated by outside sources or other people saying, oh, well, this is going to happen or this is what it looks like. What if we can decide that? What if we get to choose that? And so this is such a beautiful conversation to be had because I believe that through the power of free will, that even though there might be some pathways that are already available to us, being that they're already kind of laid out, like there's this bigger plan that we don't know about, we still have the ability to choose how we're going to go down that path, what we're going to receive on that path, the joy, the fulfillment, everything that we can get out of that path. So, in metaphysics and in this process of the Akashic records, there's a place inside of the Akash called the zone or the realm of possibility. And this is a place that we tune into in which we can pick different timelines. And so we can go and do quantum leaping, if you will, quantum jumping, where we can actually go and we can choose a highest vibrational timeline for our highest possible pathway. And not to say that we won't get there eventually. I really, again, back to a certain set of paths, perhaps being already kind of there and available to us. But at the end of the day, we get to choose that. And so the future is yours to choose. You decide. And that's how I want to answer that question.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And these are the last few questions that I ask all my guests. What is your definition of love?
Oh, okay. Whew. This might take me a while to unpack this definition of love. Um, you know, God is love. Source is love. Again, whatever you call creator, source, infinite, consciousness, it is love. And every one of us is love. We came from love. We cannot depart from it. We came from it. And so we all are created from love. And if that's the truth, that we're all created from love, then it's this wonderful opportunity for us to look through that lens, which brings in deeper compassion. It gets us to fall away from the judgment piece. But to me, love is source, love is all. And so leaning into like needing to like label it or describe it is almost impossible, I believe. Could I say that love is that feeling that you're being held? Sure. Can I say that love makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside? Sure. I can describe it to you. I can describe how it makes me feel. But at the end of the day, it's understanding that this beautiful vibration of love is what is being invited from each and every one of us to remember that we all have this within ourselves. And if we're not sure what love is, there's an invitation for you to lean into, okay, what does love feel like for me? What does it taste like for me? How does it show up for me? What appearance does love have? And this is one of the activities that I love to do is to write a love list. If you want to lean into your relationship with love, write a love list, like all the things that you love. Like, I love my kids. I love dancing. I love singing. What are those things? And I want to tell you guys, every client so far has forgotten the most important thing to love, and that is themselves. So make sure you put yourself on the top of that love list. But again, I believe that love is source and love is us. I believe that that is our natural expression of who we are. And if you want to deepen your relationship with it, lean into what it feels like, tastes like, sounds like, looks like, and play with that because it'll deepen your relationship with love.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
Yay!
Lastly, what does the sun represent to you?
It's so interesting because I've really been deepening my relationship with the sun. And okay, what if the sun is a representation or expression of God? And so this is something that I've been in contemplation with. And so, for me, uh, the sun has a very interesting dualistic energy to it, right? Like if we get too much sun, it will burn us. If we don't get enough sun, then we'll freeze. And so it's much like that relationship within ourselves with our ego mind, isn't it? Right? Like a certain degree of it is really good for us, and too much of it can be not so good for us. And so it's this beautiful ebb and flow that we're being invited to lean into in terms of respect, in terms of compassion. If we can look at the sun and we can say, okay, the sun can be good and bad, but I can love it anyways, then it invites us to also speak to this with each and every soul on this planet, you know, and recognize that there is this deeper aspect of compassion that we can have for one another. So for me, the sun also is a representation of that divine light that each of us has within us. And I do believe that we're impacting the sun and the sun's ability to shine. I do also believe that seeing that we are coming into the age of Aquarius, it means that the light is being shone on this world like it has never been before. It means that we're going to see the deeper buried truths that are coming to the surface now for us to see. And so that might mean that some of us are witnessing things that we feel are awful and atrocious. Those things were always there, it's just that they were hiding. It's kind of like the analogy of like if we were in a, if the room was pitch dark and I turned a light switch on, well, now I can see the mess on the floor and now I can see the scuffs on the wall and I can see the dust on the shelves. The light's been turned on, and not just, from analogy standpoint, but from a literal standpoint, the sun is having more solar flares than it's ever had. It's active and it's saying, hey, I'm talking to you. Do you want to build a relationship with me? Because it's time. It's time for us to really start working together. So I know that, I couldn't answer the question in a different way for you, but I really feel like, again, the invitation is to build the relationship with the sun. And that's something that I'm in the process of, in my own path as well. So that's as far as I've gotten down that rabbit hole.
There were zero expectations on how to answer it, and you answered it perfectly.
Of
So,
course. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you,
yes.
Sage.
Are there any last thoughts or words you have for the audience?
Oh, well, I am going to close your records, Sage. So I'm just going to acknowledge that, and I'll close your records, and then I'll finish with whatever last words that they want me to express here. So I first want to say thank you. God, we thank you for allowing us to experience your pure love through the Akash. The records are now closed. Amen. Beautiful. So just allowing that closure again, thy sacred container, keeping that intact. Here's what I want to share. In every given moment, you have everything you need and then some. In every given moment, you have everything you need and then some. And I know sometimes it's hard to receive that, because if you're moving through something very difficult in your life, or you're in a place of despair, it's like, I don't feel like I have anything I need, right? But that is really the truth. That even in those moments of difficulty and despair and suffering, that we're actually getting what we need. We're either getting the catalyst, or we're getting the experience that is needed for ourselves and maybe for others. And so once we can come to that acceptance, we open ourselves up to receiving. We open ourselves up to receiving the goodness in life, receiving abundance in whatever that is: health, wealth, relationship. And so I'm inviting you to remember that you have everything you need. And your job is to witness that in that present moment, because once you witness that, then more of the things that you might need, more of the things that you even desire, begin to show up for you in such a beautiful, profound way. So that would be my last little bit of advice as you go on to your day.
Wonderful. Yeah, this has been an absolutely illuminating, wonderful, high vibratory interview. I'm
Hooray!
so honored and happy to have met you. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, thank you, Sage. First of all, I want to share this with you because it took me 20 years to write this book, Sage. So there's no timeline, by the way, on your books. And I just want to leave that as a little bit of inspiration. So I wrote the arc, and it's based on my real near death experiences, but through a fantasy fiction. So through a character who goes and experiences heaven and all of that. So that book can be found on Amazon, but also on the website, rosehope.ca. And I know that there's a couple goodies and things we're going to put in the show notes for the listeners as well. So if people want to reach out and just lean in there, or if they're feeling the call, then my door is open.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. And thank you all for listening. I'll put everything that you need to contact Rose in the description box below. Thank you so much. Praise the sun. See you next time.
Thank you.